He got a daycare teacher fired over Veggie Tales, and now everyone hates him for it. The teacher looked him dead in the eye and lied to his face. Not once. Not twice. But over and over again, week after week, with a straight face and zero shame. And the crazy part is, the evidence was a cartoon vegetable. This whole situation started small, the way a lot of wild stories do, with a little kid just talking about his day. When this dad picked up his son from daycare, his son mentioned watching a show with cartoon vegetables. Now if you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, you already know exactly what that is. Veggie Tales. The animated Christian children's series featuring a very enthusiastic tomato and a very nervous cucumber singing songs about faith and biblical values. Look, the show is not traumatizing anyone. It is genuinely wholesome by most measures. But this dad had a specific reason he did not want his son watching it at daycare, and whether you agree with that reason or not, it was his call to make as a parent. His son was young, impressionable, at that age where everything sticks, where a catchy song or a confident on-screen character can plant ideas that take root before a parent even knows they are growing. He was not panicking. He was not overreacting. He just had a boundary, and he figured the reasonable thing to do was communicate it directly to the person responsible for his child for 8 hours a day. So the next morning he went in and asked the teacher directly, "Did you show the kids Veggie Tales?" And here is where the story takes a turn. The teacher did not say yes. She did not say no. She said she would not show the kids anything inappropriate. Which is a fascinating non-answer. Because the dad did not ask about inappropriate content. He asked a simple yes or no question about a specific show. The fact that she pivoted to talking about appropriateness instead of just answering the question tells you everything you need to know about what kind of person you are dealing with. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she decided to dodge rather than engage. You could picture the moment. A parent standing in a classroom doorway, asking something direct and reasonable, and a teacher giving him a smile that does not reach her eyes and a sentence carefully constructed to sound like an answer without actually being one. That is not an accident. That is a choice. That is someone who has already decided she is not going to be told what to do, and is just skilled enough to disguise that decision as a reasonable response. That is not a good sign from someone responsible for your child. That evening, the dad went home and asked his son again. "Did you watch Veggie Tales today?" Yes. So not only had it happened the first time, but it had happened again on the very day he had gone in and specifically asked for it to stop. Think about how deflating that must have felt. He had taken the time to go in before his own workday, asked what he thought was a simple question, received what sounded like a reassurance, and then sat through an entire day thinking the matter was handled. Only to come home and find out from a small child that nothing had changed. He emailed the administration. They responded quickly. They told him Veggie Tales was not an approved media to show the children, that it had never been shown, and that it would never be shown. A clear, firm, official response. Case closed, right? Wrong. The following week his son came home and confirmed he had watched Veggie Tales again. At this point you have to step back and appreciate the level of stubbornness this teacher was showing. She had been confronted by a parent. She had been told by administration that the show was not approved. She had received what was essentially an official warning, and she still decided that she knew better than everyone and kept right on pressing play. What was going through her mind at that point is genuinely hard to understand. Was she convinced she was doing something good and important for the children? Did she believe no one would find out? Did she simply not care? Whatever the reasoning, the behavior reveals something important about how she saw herself in relation to parents and administrators. She did not see herself as accountable to them. She saw herself as the expert in that room, and everyone else as people who just did not understand what the children truly needed. That is a remarkable level of commitment to a cartoon vegetable program. The dad reached out again. This time the administration suggested that maybe his son was confused. Maybe he was misremembering. Maybe a 4 or 5-year-old was somehow generating false memories of a very specific animated series with talking cucumbers and tomatoes. Right. Because that is the most logical explanation. Not that the teacher was continuing to do what she had already been caught doing twice. There is something particularly maddening about being gaslit on behalf of your own child. Because now the dad was not just fighting the teacher. He was fighting an institution that had decided it was easier to question the reliability of a small boy than to hold one of their employees accountable. That is the kind of thing that turns a patient person into someone who starts taking days off work. Now here is where the dad made a move that most parents probably think about but never actually do. He asked his boss for time off, left work early, walked past the front desk despite being told to stop, and walked directly into the classroom. You can imagine what that walk felt like. The fluorescent lights overhead, the little paper decorations on the doors, the distant sound of children's programming echoing down the hallway, getting louder with every step. And there it was. Right on the screen. Veggie Tales. In full animated vegetable glory. The tomato singing. The cucumber looking nervous. Exactly what his son had been telling him every single week. He took a picture. He got a warning for barging in without permission, which he himself acknowledged was fair. But the administration could no longer pretend the situation was not happening. The teacher was required to take all her tapes home and was banned from ever bringing them in again. Problem solved, surely. Nope. The very next week his son came home and said he had watched Veggie Tales again. Let me just sit with that for a second. She had been warned by parents. She had been warned by administration. Tapes had been confiscated. She had been explicitly told no more. And she still found a way to show this child Veggie Tales. At that point this is not even really about Veggie Tales anymore. This is about a person who has decided that rules simply do not apply to her, that parents do not have the right to make decisions about their own children, and that she alone knows what is best for the kids in her care. She had gone out of her way to source or borrow or otherwise obtain a way to keep playing this program after the physical tapes were taken out of her hands. The effort involved in that is staggering to think about. She did not forget. She did not slip up. She actively worked around the consequences she had been given. That is a deeply concerning attitude in someone who works with young children. This is the part where the dad started building what he himself called the Anti-Veggie Tales Coalition. He reached out to other parents and found that several of them shared his frustration. And here is a detail worth noting. Even some of the Christian parents in the group were on his side. One mother who actually watched Veggie Tales at home with her daughter did not want it shown at daycare, not because she had a problem with the content, but because she wanted to be the one having those conversations with her child if questions came up. That is an entirely reasonable position. She was not rejecting the show. She was protecting her role as the person who introduced it, who framed it, who sat next to her daughter and answered the questions that followed. That is thoughtful parenting. And it shows that this was never really a war against Veggie Tales. It was a war against a teacher who had decided she was above accountability. What happened next was the natural result of everything that had come before. The teacher was fired. And suddenly people who had been nodding along with the situation for weeks had a lot of feelings about it. Friends felt bad. Other parents felt guilty. The dad was painted as the villain who had taken things too far. His own wife told him he had pulled a him and gone on the warpath. Even people who had been part of the coalition seemed to suddenly feel like maybe the consequences were more than they bargained for. It is a strange and very human thing, the way collective guilt works. People who had stood beside him, who had signed on to the same cause, who had made the same complaints, quietly stepped back once there was a real cost to point at. Suddenly the firing felt like something that had happened to the teacher rather than something she had earned through months of deliberate, repeated defiance. And look, the guilt is understandable on a human level. Nobody enjoys watching someone lose their job. But let us be very honest about what actually happened here. This teacher was asked politely to stop. She refused. She was told officially by administration to stop. She refused. She had materials confiscated. She found a workaround. She was given every possible opportunity to simply comply with a straightforward parental request, and at every single juncture she chose defiance. The consequences she faced were the direct result of her own repeated choices. Here is the thing that keeps getting lost in this conversation. The dad did not get the teacher fired. The teacher got the teacher fired. Every time she chose to keep showing that program after being told not to, she was writing her own ending. Every dismissive answer she gave, every ignored warning, every workaround she found, that was all her. The dad just kept following up until the institution was forced to take the situation seriously. So what is the verdict here? This dad is not the asshole. Not even close. He made a clear and reasonable parenting request. He was lied to. He was gaslit. He was told his child was confused. He had to physically walk into the building and produce photographic evidence just to prove that what his son was telling him was true. And even after all of that, the behavior continued. At every step he escalated only when the previous step had failed. That is not a warpath. That is a parent doing exactly what a parent is supposed to do, which is advocate persistently for his child. The teacher had options at every single point in this story. She could have said yes, we showed it and it will not happen again. She could have apologized. She could have explained her reasoning and tried to reach a compromise. She could have stopped when administration told her to stop. She did none of those things. Instead she lied, deflected, got caught, kept going, got caught again, had her materials removed, and still found a way to keep the behavior going. When someone refuses every off-ramp you give them, the destination they arrive at is not your fault. Let the other parents feel whatever they need to feel. Guilt is a complicated emotion and losing a job is hard to watch even when it is deserved. But this dad should not carry 1 ounce of that weight. He fought for his kid, he told the truth, he followed the process, and the process worked exactly the way it was supposed to. The animated vegetables went home. The defiant teacher went with them. And his son is now getting to come home from daycare without watching something his dad specifically asked to keep out of his day. That is exactly how this was supposed to end. She called his kid wrong in front of everyone, and he made her regret it instantly. His son raised his hand at the dinner table, shared a fact he was proud of, and watched an adult confidently tell him he was wrong. The fact that this kid was completely right makes what happened next feel like something straight out of a movie. And the way this dad handled it is going to split the room. Half of you are going to say he was absolutely right. The other half are going to say he took it too far. But before you decide, you need to hear every detail, because the details matter a lot here. This dad and his wife had the wife's friend over for dinner. The friend is a teacher, and apparently dinner with her often involves a lot of venting about her job. She talked about impossible parents, unsupportive administration, kids who do not listen, and everyone having opinions about curriculum. The dad includes these complaints as background context, and honestly that context is important. Picture the atmosphere at that table before the food even got cold. This woman had walked in carrying the weight of a profession that she clearly felt did not respect her enough, and she had been talking about that weight for a while. By the time the main course was winding down, the emotional temperature in the room was already set to a particular frequency. Someone who spends dinner venting about parents who think they know better than the teacher is already primed, already a little defensive, already carrying a quiet frustration toward anyone who might challenge her expertise. That matters. Because someone who walks into dinner already frustrated with parents who think they know better than the teacher might have a particular kind of reaction when a child in front of her offers up information she did not already have. The son, who the dad describes as a huge Star Trek fan, heard the teacher mention she was working on a lesson plan for Black History Month and that she was making a fact sheet about Martin Luther King Jr. The kid's face lit up with something he knew that connected his hero to the person on the lesson plan. He told her that she should include the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was a Star Trek fan. Think about what that moment looked like from across the table. A child, probably sitting up a little straighter, eyes bright, feeling that specific electric joy of knowing something relevant and being given the perfect opening to share it. He was not trying to correct anyone. He was not showing off. He was a kid who loved something deeply and wanted to build a bridge between that love and a conversation the adults were having. That is a sweet moment. A kid making a genuine connection between history and something he loves, offering it up proudly to contribute to a conversation the grown-ups were already having. The teacher's response was delivered with what the dad describes as a patronizing tone and expression. She did not say, "Oh, interesting, let me look that up." She did not say, "Where did you hear that?" She did not pause, she did not soften, she did not offer even a small window of possibility that the child in front of her might know something she did not. She said that maybe he would have been a fan if he had still been alive when the show aired. Implying, with full confidence and a tone that probably felt like a door closing, that Martin Luther King Jr. died before Star Trek ever came out. You can almost hear the slight smile in her voice. The gentle, patient correction of someone who has spent years being the authority in a room full of people younger and less informed than her. Oh no. The son did not back down. And honestly, good for him, because backing down would have meant accepting something false about someone he clearly cared about knowing. He said that Martin Luther King Jr. was alive when Star Trek aired and that he actually used to watch it with his daughters. Imagine the courage that takes for a kid, sitting at a dinner table with adults, to look a teacher in the eye and say, "Actually, you are wrong." The teacher doubled down. She said the civil rights leader died before the show ever aired. She was wrong. Completely and factually wrong. And she said it with the kind of certainty that does not leave room for questions, the kind of certainty that makes a kid feel small and foolish for daring to push back, for trusting what he knew, for speaking at all. And this is where the dad stepped in. He did not yell. He did not lecture. He did not make a big theatrical production out of it. He simply said, "You are wrong and my son is right." 6 words. Calm, clear, and unambiguous. The teacher's response to being corrected by a parent in front of a child was to tell him he was a perfect example of a parent who cannot acknowledge when his child is wrong. She pivoted immediately from defending her incorrect fact to attacking his character as a father, which is a remarkable move. He fired back that she was a perfect example of a teacher who assumes she knows everything and cannot connect with her students because she does not respect them. His wife stepped in and made everyone change the topic. After dessert, the dad pulled up a video on YouTube. It was a clip of Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura on Star Trek, talking about Martin Luther King Jr. telling her not to quit the show because it was important for Black representation on television. Not only was the man alive when Star Trek was airing, he was actively engaged with its cultural significance, engaged enough to personally encourage one of its stars to stay. The dad showed the video to everyone at the table. No commentary. No victory lap. Just the footage, sitting there, doing its work. The teacher asked why he could not just let it go. He told her he did not want his son to feel like he was being punished for sharing accurate information about something he cared about. She said he had never been in her classroom. He said he did not need to be, because people are who they are regardless of where they are standing. That line landed. You could feel it land through the screen. His wife's position is that he should have shown the video to their son privately after the friend left. She argues he could have used the moment to teach their child about giving grace to others and not needing external validation from everyone who doubts you. It is a thoughtful argument and it comes from a real place. But the dad disagrees, and he says that what matters to him is that his son knows his parents will always stand up for him. Now the teacher texted to say she is not coming to the fireworks because the dad is a nasty person who encourages his child to be rude and disrespectful. The wife and husband had an argument that ended with her quoting The Big Lebowski at him and telling him he does not have to be wrong to still be an asshole. Which, fair quote. But is it true here? Let us talk about what actually happened in that room. A child shared a fact. An adult with authority dismissed that fact wrongly and with condescension. The father corrected the record. He did it directly and without apology. Yes, the topic had already been moved on from. Yes, pulling out a phone after dessert to prove the point was a deliberate choice. But think about what message the alternative sends. If the dad had stayed quiet, shown the video privately, and coached his son on giving people grace, what would his son have taken away from that night? He would have walked away thinking that when an adult in a position of authority tells you that what you know is wrong, the right thing to do is smile and let it go. That is a terrible lesson. This dad is not the asshole. Not even close. His son brought something to the table that was true, generous, and enthusiastic. He was shot down by someone who should have known better, or at minimum should have responded with curiosity instead of condescension. The fact that she doubled down when the child pushed back, and then called the father a bad parent for backing him up, shows you exactly what kind of person you are dealing with. And the father was right. People are who they are regardless of where they are. A teacher who dismisses a child at a dinner table probably dismisses children in a classroom too. The wife's counterargument is worth taking seriously even if the conclusion does not land. Teaching a kid that external validation is not always necessary is genuinely valuable. But there is a difference between teaching your child not to seek approval from every person in every room, and watching someone publicly shame your kid for being correct and doing nothing about it. One is a healthy life lesson. The other is abandoning your child in a moment where they needed to feel defended. The teacher lost the fireworks and lost the argument. She can call him nasty all she wants, but the video exists, the facts are the facts, and a little boy went to bed that night knowing that when he was right and someone tried to make him feel small for it, his dad had his back. That is not being an asshole. That is being a father. And frankly, if she cannot handle being corrected at a dinner table, she might want to think long and hard about how she handles being corrected in a classroom, because kids notice everything. Let us know in the comments which story hit harder for you today. If you are enjoying the channel, a like and a subscribe would mean the world.